Craig here with Magnus Broadheads. We get a lot of questions on how do you sharpen our broadheads, and in particular the serrated heads. Now recently I did a video for Magnus on the Black Hornet serrazers, obviously a serrated version of the Black Hornet. And we also have questions on the Stinger Buzzcut, the serrated version of the Stinger. Now, the same principles apply. You can go and watch that video and apply it to this one, or watch this one and apply it to the serrazers. It's basically the same thing. But we're going to do this on a Buzzcut Stinger and just walk you through the whole process. So I got a pack. Here's obviously a brand new pack. You should not have to sharpen these out of the box. They should shave hair right out of the box. If you ever have a problem and you think that your broadheads are dull out of the pack, and you've checked shaving hair on your arm, cutting a piece of paper, call Magnus, email Magnus. We're here for you. Customer support's what we specialize in. So what I've got here though is a used 100 grain Stinger Buzzcut. This was actually used by my daughter. She killed a buck probably 4 weeks or so ago. Shot it on a .2 shot. And she only shoots about 45 pounds. Got over half the arrow penetration, and the buck piled up dead. We found him about 35 yards from our tree stand. He kind of did a loop and plopped right there, blood just crazy. But this is the broadhead that did that. You can see video of that on this channel as well. So there you go. Anyway, so we're going to tear this thing apart and we are going to sharpen it. All right, so how do we sharpen a serrated broadhead? Well, let's first talk about how not to sharpen a serrated broadhead. You do not want to use a pull-through sharpener. This is just one of many that you can get out there, like you would on, say, just a regular knife. This happens to be a skinning knife. You can use this type of sharpener by pulling through on a knife. You could use this type of sharpener on, say, a Magnus Stinger, which is basically a knife blade type of broadhead. You could use it on a regular Black Hornet. Problem is when you get into a serrated and you go through here, you hear those clicks? I'm going very light because I don't want to mess this broadhead up. Every click, the little sharpening blades are dropping into the serrations, and that messes up the leading edge or trailing edge, depending on which direction you pull it, of the serration, and you don't want to do that, okay? So you do not want to use a pull-through type of sharpener on either a Stinger Buzzcut or a Black Hornet serrazer, or actually our serrated Killer Bee. So any of our serrated heads, don't use a pull-through. All right, so what kind of sharpener do we use? Well, we actually want to use a sharpener like you would, say, the old-fashioned stone on a knife blade. So you basically have got a flat surface, and you're going to pull that blade across that flat surface. That way we don't mess up the serrations. Now you can use, there's a zillion types out there. Lansky's a popular brand name, great one. You've got a jig, clamp the blade down in, and basically pull the stone across it. I've had it for years. I have a KME system, okay? So you got a KME jig, and you've got a stone, and you got cutting oil. I like it. There's also other jigs out there. You could use sandpaper or stones or whatever, but the point is you want to basically take that blade and you want to pull across that surface, okay? You want to come and you want to pull across that surface, not going like this with the sawing action that you would in, say, this pull through, okay? That way you don't screw up the serrations, all right? So let's talk a little technical here. You're going to have to take apart the broadhead to do this properly, okay? Especially if you got a Black Hornet serrazer, but even the Buzzcuts, because these bleeders stick down and they're going to get touched on your sharpening stone as you pull it across, okay? If you put it in this thing jig like this and drag it across, you touch this end and you're gonna screw up your bleeder on your broadhead, okay? So let me show you the basics of what you need. To take apart the head, there's a Phillips screw head in here, okay? You need to use a #1 Phillips screwdriver. Number 2s are the most common Phillips head screwdriver that you probably have laying around. You probably got 10 of these between your house and garage, okay? This would be what you'd use for, you know, switch covers, basically pretty much any Phillips screw, okay? A number 1 is one size down. You don't need like a micro size, you know, like you'd use for electronics or stuff like that, but get a number 1 Phillips. It is important. If you try and do a number 2, it will go in there, but you're gonna struggle because it won't have enough surface area to bite for loosening, and definitely not retightening it back down when we assemble it. A number 1 is the size that you need for our Phillips screw, okay? All right, so quick disclaimer, even after these have been through an animal, they're probably sharp and will cut you, okay? So be careful handling them. It's nice to have a surface like this one where I've got a slit in between the boards on my workbench because I can drop the bleeder in there and just kind of lets things lay flat. So very carefully, insert your number 1 Phillips screwdriver in, push down and turn and unscrew the Phillips screw. Set that aside, you're going to need that later, okay? Once you do that, the main blade will pull out. Again, being very careful, okay? You can see the blood on this thing left over. It was used, okay? From there, we have a small aluminum wedge that holds in the bleeder. I like taking a small screwdriver or even a thin knife blade and just getting in there and popping that thing out. That's all you have to do. You're going to save that for later. Okay, now we've got to get the bleeder blade out. You can see there's blood on this bleeder blade. Now what can happen is when you kill an animal, you get blood, you get fat, sinew, other things in there, and it dries and becomes sticky. And these are tight tolerance to begin with, so then they become very difficult to get out once your animal, the fluids from the animal basically have dried. So I usually take like a pair of needle nose pliers and kind of grab them, and I sit here and I kind of twist it. I don't twist too hard, and I just pop it out. If you do and you damage it, again, we have a lifetime replacement warranty, so we would take care of it. But you can see all the dried fluids, basically blood, on there. Again, be careful because this is still sharp. So what I would recommend is, especially on a broadhead where it's already been used on an animal, again, you got dried blood and stuff on there, is I would take some dish soap and some water and maybe an old toothbrush or something and scrub them up. Get all the fluids and stuff off. Get it cleaned up before you go ahead and sharpen the head. Okay, a couple things to start with here. You need to follow the instructions of the manufacturer of your sharpening jig. And in this case with KME, I have the blade running parallel with the front of the jig. Okay, this is the sharpening stone that KME sends with it. I've already applied a bunch of honing oil that comes with the jig and the stone to the top of the stone very liberally. Okay, so what I recommend doing is to go ahead and take a black Sharpie marker, okay, before you start, and go ahead and color the beveled side of your broadhead black. This will allow you to see how much of that side you are actually contacting with the stone as you sharpen. And in these jigs like this, you can change the angle by repositioning the blade in or out and to get more or less of that blade area. Right, so if you had a head that was incredibly dull, you'd want to go with the more aggressive side of your stone and then go to your finer side. This one was not beat up bad at all, so I'm going to stick with the finer side. Now, there's debate. Do you go forward or do you go backward? Do you go front and back? What do you do? I'm not here to tell you which way is best to do it. My preference is always to go back, okay? So I'm going to take my time and I'm going to go backwards. And I am going to go backwards the same number of strokes for each side of the broadhead. Then I'm going to flip it over. You can see I've just caught the leading edge. So I may adjust the positioning of this. And this same thing applies if you were doing, say, sandpaper, or if you had a Lansky that's in a jig, or you run the stone across the blade. And when the first sides are done, you're going to come in, you're going to do the other side. And you can even do our tip, which is at a different blade angle than the main blades, by repositioning the blade in here so that the tip is again parallel with the front. This one's got a slight little burr I can feel on the tip from going through that deer. So we're just going to sit here and be uniform and take that off and resharpen the tip. All Magnus heads are back sharpened too. So you could even, if you wanted to, reposition this in the jig and you could resharpen the back side of these blades if that's what you wanted to do. Another thing you can do is you can sharpen the bleeders. It's the same principle. I took the small bleeder. It's got a very small blade edge on it. These are still pretty sharp, but you can touch these up. Again, in my case, you parallel it with the jig and you just sit there and you run it over your stone. You can do the same amount for each side. All right, so if we really want to get these sharp, then we would do what we call stropping. And stropping is kind of that old Bugs Bunny thing where you used to see they'd take the razor blade for shaving, they'd run it over a leather strap. That's basically what we're talking about. So I take, this is an old chunk of leather that I've got nailed to a piece of 5/4 board. I actually take some engine honing oil. It's got oils and like little diamond, I think, dust in there to help with sharpening. And I put it on the leather. And this leather is very saturated already, but I do it every time. And I just kind of take my finger and smear it around. I'd be very generous with it. And we're going to find is this is the key in getting any knife or broadhead, any cutting edge, razor sharp. Okay, so now applying the same principles we used when we were on the sharpening stone. I have mine back in my jig. You can see it's parallel with the jig, okay? And now we're basically going to go backwards across this leather. The longer and more you do this, the sharper it will become. What the leather is doing is it's actually taking off the curl. If we looked at the edge of this under a microscope, we would see a curl on the edge of this, and it's just polishing up all these surfaces and making it razor sharp. Again, I really don't think you can do this too much. You're going to get oils all over it. And after a couple passes, you start really feeling that leather rub the blade. All right, so once you've got your blades back to as sharp as you are happy with, whether you're shaving hair or cutting paper or whatever you're happy with, obviously be very careful. It's time to reassemble the broadhead. So we still have all of our pieces here, okay? So basically we're going to take our ferrule, and again, we have scrubbed these. This is also where I will check, especially in the blade grooves, to see if there's anything that I didn't get out of there. And if there is, I will take a toothpick or a thin screwdriver or a knife blade and just make sure that I've got everything out of there, because you want these blades to seat all the way in. So you want to make sure everything's clean. First thing you're going to do is you're going to take your bleeder blade and you're going to set it in the slot. I like to take the fat end, back end, and put it in first. And then the front end, these are usually fairly tight. Sometimes they will snap in by hand. Sometimes you're going to take some needle nose pliers, just give a simple squeeze, not hard, and it just depresses it the rest of the way in. From there, you're going to take your wedge block. You're going to drop your wedge block in there like this. Now some fit tighter than others, but you're going to line up the slot. Then you're carefully going to pick up your main blade and you're going to slide the main blade down through the slots. I like to put my thumb at the back of the block back here just to keep it in place. Sometimes they will slide out. Once you get it in there, back your fingers away and slide it all the way in. Again, remember, be very careful, because now you've got a razor sharp head that you've just sharpened. Look down through there, you make sure that the hole is lined up. You got everything lined up. Everything looks good. I'll put this back in my little slot right here. I get my number 1 Phillips screwdriver and my little screw and just screw it back together. There we go. However, we are not done. We got one more thing to check. So the last thing that we need to check is if the head still spins true. Now the thing that we do at Magnus that I don't believe any other company does is we hand dial at the shop every broadhead in so that the tip to the true center line of the ferrule and arrow is within 0.003 of an inch. Now we machine things with extreme tolerances. However, there are a couple thousandths of wiggle room in this tip, and you want to have this so there's no wobble. It should go back together very close to that. You and I can't check it, but what we can do is we can spin check this and look. And I see 0 wobble in the tip. And a good way to really check this that I've found is to take a cardboard box and butt the cardboard box right up to the tip of the broadhead and hold it and spin the broadhead. And what you will find is if it's out of square, then you will have a hole that walks. And what we can see here is there's a tiny little dot, and there was no walking of this broadhead. So all you need is a simple arrow spinner. You can pick them up at any archery supply house, probably on Amazon and other places, and get this thing back to where it's spinning true. All right, so there we go, everybody. We got a head that was ran through a deer, wasn't dinged up bad, but is now razor sharp and ready to go back in the quiver, just as if we took it out of the package. So remember, as always, all Magnus broadheads are made 100% in the USA. We have a 0 questions asked, no BS lifetime warranty. You damage, you bend this blade or the head in any way, all you have to do is take a photograph of it with your phone or camera or whatever and email that photo to customer service at magnusbroadheads.com with all of your information. We need address, phone number, email address, all that stuff, and we'll send you a replacement free of charge. Doesn't get any better than that right there, huh? So that's it. That's how you sharpen the serrated heads. Doesn't matter if it's a Stinger Buzzcut or the serrated version of our Killer Bees or the Black Hornet Serrazer, the process is the same. So, as always, if you got questions, you can reach out to us on social media. You can email us at customer service at magnusbroadheads.com. You can call the shop. You can reach out to myself, Derek Craig, on social media. We'll take care of you. So, God bless, stay safe. Hope your deer seasons or other big seasons are going great. And check us out at magnusbroadheads.com.